The morning of the HOA annual meeting, Jake Harlan walked into that room carrying a plain black binder. No lawyer, no bodyguard, no theatrics. Just a man, a binder, and 4 years of patience wrapped inside a quiet smile. Sophia Voss sat at the head of the table in a cream blazer, her Porsche Cayenne gleaming outside the window. Lauren, his wife, sat 3 seats down, wearing a diamond bracelet that hadn't come from Jake's hands. The room was packed, 60 neighbors, 2 local reporters, 1 county attorney. Sophia cleared her throat and called the meeting to order. Jake opened the binder to page 1. And the next 20 minutes destroyed everything every single person in that room thought they knew.
Pause, because before we get to that moment, before those walls came down and those faces went pale, you need to understand what it cost this man to get there. You need to feel the weight of what was taken from him. Because this story, this isn't just about offense. This is about what happens when a quiet, decent man finally decides that enough is enough. Stay with me. It's going to get uncomfortable before it gets good.
Evergreen Ridge wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a performance. Every lawn in that gated community in Orange County, California, was cut at the same angle. Every driveway pressure washed every Sunday. Every neighbor waved at each other with the exact same smile. The kind that says I see you and means I'm watching you. Jake Harlan had lived here for 11 years. He knew every crack in every sidewalk, every family secret buried under every rosebush. He wasn't the richest man on the ridge, but he was something rarer in a place like this. He was real. When the Delacroix family lost their roof to a windstorm 3 summers back, Jake was up there himself at 6 a.m. with a ladder and a tarp. When the Okafor kids needed school supplies after their father lost his contracting job, a box appeared at their door with no name on it. Everyone on Estrada Lane knew who sent it. Nobody said anything because Jake didn't want them to. That was just the kind of man he was. So when Sophia Voss returned from Munich in the spring, beautiful, polished, carrying European confidence like a designer handbag, and her parents' Victorian estate had storm damage on the east wing, the whole ridge waited to see what would happen. Jake was on the roof before the insurance adjuster finished his paperwork. He fixed it in 4 days, paid for half the materials himself, didn't ask for a thing. At the welcome back barbecue Jake threw in the cul-de-sac, the one with the live jazz and the catered brisket and the string lights everyone still talked about 2 years later, Sophia pulled him aside near the magnolia tree and hugged him, tight, the kind of hug that carries genuine feeling. She whispered in his ear, "You're the last real man here, Jake." He laughed, squeezed her shoulder, said, "Just a good neighbor." And he meant it. What he didn't see, because good men rarely do, was his wife Lauren standing 15 feet away, watching that moment with an expression that had nothing to do with jealousy. It had everything to do with calculation. That same night, Lauren was in the kitchen on her phone, typing. Jake heard her laugh at something, assumed she was texting her sister. He was wrong. You know what the scariest predators in nature have in common? They don't announce themselves. They move quietly. They wait, and they choose their prey carefully. Hold that thought. 3 weeks later, the HOA newsletter announced a special election for a new community president. The previous one, a retired judge named Walter Finch, had stepped down after a health scare. The nominee, Sophia Voss. Jake read it at the breakfast table and thought, interesting. Lauren smiled behind her coffee mug and said, "She'll be great for the community." Right. What Jake didn't know, what he had no reason to suspect, was that Lauren had quietly nominated Sophia for the position 6 weeks earlier, in a private Slack channel, a channel that included 12 of the 16 HOA board members, a channel Jake Harlan had never been invited to. The vote wasn't an election. It was an installation. Lauren raised her eyes from her coffee mug and looked at Jake across the table. And for just 1 second, 1/2 second, something crossed her face that he'd never seen in 14 years of marriage. Hunger. Not for him, not for anything he had. For something she was about to take. The first HOA meeting under Sophia's presidency was held on a Tuesday night in the Voss family's great room. 17-foot ceilings, a Steinway in the corner, wine nobody was actually allowed to drink because it was a formal proceeding. Jake sat in the third row. Ellie, their 9-year-old, had drawn him a picture that afternoon of the two of them in the backyard under the oak tree he'd planted the year she was born. He'd folded it neatly and tucked it in his breast pocket. He still had it when everything changed. Sophia stood at the front of the room in a deep burgundy dress, reading from a leather portfolio. She smiled at the room the way a surgeon smiles before they cut. She said, very calmly, very warmly, that after reviewing historical land records from the county surveyor's office, it had come to her attention that the 30-foot strip of land running along the rear of the Harlan property, the land where Jake had built his backyard fence, planted his garden, installed Ellie's swing set, had never legally belonged to the Harlans. She said it belonged to her grandfather. The room went completely still. Jake actually laughed. He said, Sophia, that land has been in our deed for 11 years. I have the survey documentation. She nodded graciously and produced a plat map. From 1974. Jake looked at it, then looked at the board, then looked at Lauren. Lauren raised her hand. She said calmly, we support the Voss legacy. 12 other hands went up. Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a room full of people you trusted and realized, in one single moment, that you were the only one who didn't know what was happening? That the room had already made a decision before you walked in? Because what Jake was feeling right now has a name. It's not just betrayal. It's the specific stomach-dropping horror of realizing the trap was built around you while you were still standing inside it. Jake requested a copy of the plat map. He took it home. He had an engineer friend examine it. The friend called the next morning with a voice that sounded careful. He said, Jake, this document was printed on paper that didn't exist until 2022. 6:12 in the morning. Jake was in the kitchen making Ellie's school lunch when he heard it. A mechanical grinding. Metal on metal. He looked out the back window. 4 workers in orange vests were pulling apart his fence, section by section. Neat, efficient, professional. Like a demolition crew that had done this before. Because they had. Ellie came running down the stairs in her pajamas and saw it through the glass door. She pressed both hands against it and started crying. Silent at first, then louder. Daddy, they're taking the swing. Jake walked to the back door. His hands were shaking, not from fear. From something deeper than fear. The kind of feeling that lives below the chest, in the stomach, in the blood. He opened the door and stepped outside. Sophia stood at the edge of the property in a white jacket, overseeing the removal with the kind of pleasant authority that people practice in mirrors. She gave him a small, apologetic shrug. From across the fence line, Lauren appeared with her phone raised. She was live streaming it. She said to her followers with a bright practice smile, restoring what's right. Jake stood in his own backyard and didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't scream. He looked at his wife, filming the destruction of the home they had built together, and felt something he would later describe to his attorney as the very last door closing. What Lauren didn't notice, what nobody noticed, was that Jake's hand was in his pocket. And his phone was recording. Every second, every word, every face. Lauren finally looked at him. Her eyes were flat, empty, like looking into a window with no room behind it. She said, you always said family first, now I'm choosing mine. The fence was gone in 22 minutes. Ellie cried for 2 hours. Jake filed the first police report at 9 a.m. And somewhere in the back of his very quiet, very organized mind, something that had been sleeping for a long time woke up. You know, people always say the strongest reaction to betrayal is rage, screaming, breaking things, dramatic exits. But here's what nobody talks about. The people who don't scream. The ones who go completely, terrifyingly calm. Those are the ones you should worry about. Because Jake Harlan didn't break. He started building. And what he was about to build was going to take this entire neighborhood apart at the seams. 4 days after the fence came down, Jake found the journals. Lauren had kept them in a fireproof box in the back of their closet. The kind of box designed to survive disasters, which Jake thought bitterly it had. There were 7 notebooks. He sat on the floor of the closet and read for 3 hours. The early ones were full of Lauren, her voice, the woman he'd married. Funny, ambitious, restless with energy, full of plans for a fashion brand she wanted to launch in New York. Page after page of mood boards, business ideas, brand names sketched in the margins. Then the pages changed. Around the time Ellie was born, Jake remembered that year. Lauren had been excited about the move to Orange County. She'd seemed happy. She'd told him she was happy. He'd believed her because she was his wife, and he loved her, and he was. He understood now. Painfully, fatally naive. One entry from 8 years ago read, "He doesn't even see it. He made me smaller and called it love." Another, "Sophia is right. Stability is just mediocrity wearing a wedding ring." Jake read that line 3 times. He pulled out his phone and Googled the phrase. It appeared on Sophia Voss's LinkedIn, a quote from a business talk she'd given in 2019. Sophia had been working on Lauren for years. Here's a question I want you to sit with. Is it possible to love someone and quietly destroy them at the same time? Because Lauren wasn't lying when she said she felt trapped. That part was real. But the answer to feeling trapped is a conversation, a decision, a choice made with honesty. Not a conspiracy, not a property theft, not. And we'll get to this. Not what she did next. Jake kept digging. And what he found next turned his blood cold. Sophia Voss had done this before. Not once, twice. A Marin County cul-de-sac in 2019, forged deeds. HOA board bribed with cash and consulting contracts. A family lost their backyard addition, their renovation investment, their property value. They sold at a loss within the year. A Pasadena HOA in 2021. Same pattern, forged plat maps, same law firm, same demolition contractor, 3 families displaced, the HOA president. A woman named Bridget Osei had been quietly replaced by a Voss ally. Evergreen Ridge was the third one. Sophia threw a victory party on the last Saturday of the month. Champagne, a live string quartet, catered from a West Hollywood restaurant that charged $400 per person. Every neighbor came. Because in Evergreen Ridge, you came to the powerful person's party. That was the social law. Jake came too. He stood in her backyard. His backyard stole an edge. In a pressed grey shirt, holding a plate he didn't eat from, smiling at people who couldn't quite look him in the eye. Sophia found him near the bar. She tilted her head with something that looked almost like sympathy. She said, "Jake, I want you to know. This was never personal." She handed him a check, $25,000, written on Voss Family Holdings letterhead. "Goodwill," she said, "for the disruption." Jake's jaw trembled, his eyes filled. He took the check with both hands like a man
Jake,
receiving something that cost him everything. Someone took a photo. The neighborhood saw the broken man accepting a handout on camera. They laughed about it at the bar. And here's where I need you to pay very close attention. Because what you just watched, that was not a broken man, that was an actor. That check was going to become the most expensive document Sophia Voss ever signed. Jake Harlan was crying on the outside. But on the inside, he was building a case. In the parking lot 40 minutes later, a man appeared beside Jake's Range Rover. His name was Mark Reynolds, 56, silver hair, a jaw that looked like it had held a clench for about 3 years. He'd lost $300,000 to Sophia's Pasadena scheme. He pressed a USB drive into Jake's palm without looking at him. He said, "Every bribe, every Slack message, every email between Sophia's attorney and Lauren, 4 months of it. It's all there." He got in his car and drove away. Jake stood in the dark parking lot for a long moment. Then he smiled, very slightly, for the first time in weeks. 3 weeks later, Jake collapsed in the kitchen. One moment he was standing at the counter. The next moment the counter was the ceiling. He woke up in Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach with an IV in his arm and a doctor named Dr. Adeyemi asking him careful questions about his diet, his stress, his supplements. The blood work came back that evening. Trace sedatives, chronic microdosing, not enough to knock a person out all at once. Enough, taken over months, to make them foggy, emotional, erratic. Enough to make a man look unstable in a legal proceeding. Jake lay in the hospital bed and stared at the acoustic ceiling tiles and assembled the timeline in his head. The protein shakes Lauren made him every morning. The brain fog that had been building since fall. The way he'd stumbled over his words at the first HOA meeting, and Sophia had looked at Lauren with the tiniest approving nod. That night, through the slightly open hospital room door, he heard Lauren outside in the corridor, on her phone, her voice low and close. She said, "Once he looks unstable in court, the land is ours." A pause. Then, "Lucas, I know what I'm doing. I want you to stop reading for 1 second. Because this isn't a story about offense anymore. This is about a woman who looked at the man who raised her daughter, fixed her neighbors' roofs, and loved her for 14 years. And made the decision, quietly, deliberately, to poison him. And I need you to understand that evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like someone who makes your protein shake every morning and asks how you slept." Lauren's mother, Constance, a woman from Scottsdale with a silk blouse and a certainty about her own opinions, testified at the HOA hearing. She stood at the microphone and said with great dignity that Jake Harlan had spent 14 years systematically controlling her daughter's ambitions, redirecting her finances, and suppressing her natural gifts. The board listened carefully. Lauren sat in the front row in a dove-grey blazer, hands folded in her lap. On her wrist, a diamond bracelet. Jake recognized it. He'd seen it in a photo on Sophia's Instagram. A gift, Sophia had captioned, for the woman brave enough to choose herself. Lauren had been wearing another woman's jewelry to his trial. She stood at the end and served him divorce papers. Jake accepted them. He looked at the papers, then looked at Lauren. Then, very slowly,
"Here, it's over."
he smiled. Not a happy smile.
Is it?
The kind of smile a man wears when he knows something the room doesn't. Because the recording from the morning the fence came down. Lauren's voice, Sophia supervising, the demolition crew, all of it, had just been ruled admissible by a California civil court judge. Evidence of illegal property demolition. The game had just changed completely. Jake vanished from Evergreen Ridge 3 days after the hearing. No posts, no activity. His Range Rover sat in the driveway and didn't move. The Ridge assumed he'd broken, retreated. People said it in the way people say these things. With a kind of satisfied sadness that isn't really sadness at all. Lauren moved forward with the divorce proceedings. Sophia began drawing renovation plans for the disputed land. Lucas, a venture consultant from Portland who'd been Lauren's friend for 2 years before he became something considerably more, helped her choose an architect. What nobody on the Ridge knew was that Jake was in Sacramento. He was seated across a conference table from 3 people, a retired county surveyor named Douglas Fitch, who had done the original 1989 property measurements for Evergreen Ridge, a former FBI fraud investigator named Victor Ibarra, who Jake had helped relocate to California 4 years ago when his car was repossessed during a health crisis, and, via video call from Frankfurt, a German business attorney named Petra Lang, who represented Sophia Voss's former European partner, a man who had watched Sophia walk away from their joint real estate venture in 2018 with assets she had no legal right to take. In 3 weeks, they built a document case that was 37 pages long. It covered 3 states, 3 communities, 6 forged deeds, 11 bribes, 1 notary, Lauren Harlan, whose signature appeared on 4 fraudulent documents. 3 weeks. That's all it took, because here's the thing about the truth. It doesn't disappear. It just waits. It sits quietly in old files and hard drives and the memories of people who were wronged and waiting for someone to come ask the right questions. Jake Harlan asked the right questions. The last Thursday of October, Sophia arrived at 6:45 p.m. in her white Porsche Cayenne, heels clicking on the marble lobby floor of the Evergreen Ridge clubhouse. She was wearing the cream blazer. She had a new gavel. Custom-made, monogrammed. The room filled to capacity, 60 neighbors, a journalist from the OC Register who'd heard something was happening, a county attorney named Deborah Fontaine who had driven up from Santa Ana. Lauren arrived with Lucas. They sat in the second row. Jake walked in at 7:01. Plain white shirt, navy trousers, black binder. He sat down in the very center of the room, crossed his legs and waited. Sophia opened the meeting. Welcomed everyone, began her quarterly report. Jake raised his hand. She smiled. Jake, let's save comments for... I'd like to present evidence, he said. Under HOA Bylaw Section 14, any member may introduce documentation at an annual meeting. Deborah Fontaine leaned forward. Sophia's smile stayed, but something behind her eyes shifted. Jake stood up, opened the binder to page 1 and began. First, the forensic analysis of the 1974 plat map, a German document authentication lab. Independent, court-certified. Confirming the paper stock, the ink compound, and the printer signature all indicated the document was produced no earlier than 2022. The room went very still. Second, a 3-minute audio recording. Sophia's father. Recorded 18 months before his death, voluntarily, witnessed by a notary in Orange County. Describing how his daughter had approached him about reclaiming land he told her had never been theirs. Third, the Slack messages from Mark Reynolds' USB drive. 22 bribe confirmations between Sophia's attorney and 6 HOA board members, 3 of whom were sitting in that room. Fourth, the Lucas recordings. Phone conversations captured over 8 weeks through Jake's attorney's legal intercept approval, confirming the affair, confirming Lauren's involvement in document notarization, confirming the phrase, once he looks unstable in court, the land is ours. Fifth, Lauren's notary stamp, on 4 documents, documents that didn't exist when they were dated. The room wasn't breathing. Jake turned to page 31 of the binder. He held it up. The toxicology report from Hoag Hospital, detailing the sedative compounds found in his bloodstream. Dated, signed by Dr. Adeyemi, accompanied by a pharmacy analysis of the compound's likely delivery method. The report specifically noted, consistent with repeated oral ingestion over a period of 4 to 6 months. Someone in the back of the room said, "Oh my God," loud enough for everyone to hear it. Lauren stood up. Jake looked at her. He didn't say a word. She sat back down. You want to know the most powerful moment in a courtroom? Or a room like this one? It's not when someone shouts. It's not the dramatic speech. It's the silence that follows the last piece of evidence. Because in that silence, everyone in the room does the same thing. They look at the person who did it. And that person, for the first time, has nowhere to look back. Lucas was the first to move. He stood up, looked at Lauren and said, in front of 60 people and a county attorney, I want to cooperate fully with any investigation. Lauren's face did something complicated. Sophia's attorney reached for his phone. Deborah Fontaine was already on hers. By the end of the night, Sophia Voss had been removed from the HOA presidency pending criminal fraud investigation. 3 board members had resigned. The county attorney had formally requested the disputed land title be frozen pending review. The following week, Lauren Harlan was charged with notary fraud, criminal conspiracy, and 1 count of administering a controlled substance. The poisoning charge that made the front page of the OC Register. Sophia was referred to the California Attorney General's office. The prior schemes in Marin and Pasadena were reopened. And the land? The land went back to the survey. The original 1989 survey, authenticated by Douglas Fitch himself, showed no dispute. The Harlan property line was exactly where Jake had built his fence 11 years ago. Exactly where Ellie's swing set had stood. One detail emerged in divorce proceedings that landed like a quiet earthquake. Months before Sophia's first move on the property line. Before the HOA nomination, before the private Slack channel, before Lauren made her first call to Lucas. Jake had done something no one expected. He had quietly moved every shared marital asset into an irrevocable trust. in Ellie's name. His attorneys had flagged an anomaly in the property survey 18 months earlier, an unofficial boundary test Sophia had conducted, dressed as a landscaping consultation. Jake had recognized the pattern because Victor Ibarra had briefed him on the Pasadena scheme. He'd known something was coming, he just hadn't known Lauren was already inside it. The trust was clean, legal, and untouchable. Lauren got nothing. Not the Evergreen Ridge house, not the investment accounts, not the alimony she'd been told was guaranteed, not the new wing of the Voss estate she'd been promised as a reward for her role in the scheme. Her own attorney quit. Constance, her mother, the woman who had testified against her son-in-law with such dignified certainty, stopped returning her calls. Lauren's Instagram page, which had been a curated gallery of wellness content, luxury travel, and carefully filtered morning light, became a neighborhood meme. The hashtag poisoned wife ran for 2 weeks. Lucas, true to the personality that had been present all along, sent one text before boarding a flight to Frankfurt. "You were useful, now you're radioactive." Then he blocked her. "I want you to notice something. Because Lucas's exit, that's the moment the whole architecture of the scheme reveals itself. Lauren wasn't a partner in Sophia's plan. She was a piece of it. She was used as a notary, a witness, a domestic destabilizer, and an insurance policy. She thought she was choosing freedom. She chose a cage that had better curtains." It was past midnight when Lauren appeared outside Jake's property. The new gate was steel core, 8 feet, no ornament, just function. She had a suitcase, her hair was loose, her mascara had been through something. She pressed the intercom. Jake's voice came through the speaker. Calm, steady, unsurprised. She said everything she had, the regret, the confusion, the fear of the charges, the way she'd been manipulated, the way it started as a small resentment and became something she couldn't stop. She said she'd been weak. She said she'd been cruel. She said she knew that. She said, "Please." Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice came through the intercom again. He said, "You traded your family for status. Status is the first thing people take away from criminals." The gate did not open. She stood there for a long time in the dark, on the wrong side of a line she had drawn herself. There's a version of this story where Jake opens the gate, where love overrides everything, where we call that strength. But I want to offer you a different idea. Sometimes closing the door on someone who hurt you isn't coldness. It's clarity. It's knowing what you're worth. It's making sure your daughter never grows up in a house where poison is called a protein shake. That's not cruelty. That's protection. The new fence went up in November. Steel core posts. A privacy wall along the entire eastern border of the property where Sophia's parents' estate sat quiet and vacant. The elder Vosses had quietly relocated to Scottsdale rather than face the neighborhood they'd helped hollow out. Along the entire property boundary, Jake planted trees. Italian cypress, tall, narrow, permanent, each one placed with the kind of attention you give to something built to last. A neighbor. A recently arrived woman named Bertine Holloway, who had moved in from Atlanta just before the whole unraveling and therefore had the clean eyes of an outsider, leaned over her fence one afternoon and watched Jake plant the last one. She asked, "Why cypress? Why not something flowering?" Jake pressed the soil around the base of the tree, stood up, brushed the dirt from his gloves. He smiled. It was the first real smile anyone on Evergreen Ridge had seen from him in a very long time. Not the polite neighborhood wave, not the courtroom calm, not the performance of the broken-hearted man at the party. A real one. Easy, earned. He said, "Good fences make good neighbors, and great neighbors make sure the fence is permanent." Bertine laughed. And across the ridge, Ellie ran out the back door and straight to her swing set. Fully rebuilt, exactly where it had always been. And her voice carried over the yard the way children's voices do in good neighborhoods, in open air, in the late afternoon California light. Clean and clear and entirely free. Here's what I want to leave you with. Jake Harlan didn't win because he was louder. He didn't win because he was angrier or richer or more connected. He won because he was patient, methodical, and absolutely certain of one thing. The truth, handled carefully, is more powerful than any lie, no matter how well it's constructed. He didn't just survive the betrayal. He had already outplayed it, months before any of it became visible. That's not revenge, that is mastery. Documents everything. Jake's phone recording turned a personal betrayal into undeniable evidence. Patterns expose lies. Sophia had done this before. When victims compare stories, the truth becomes impossible to hide. Protect what matters early. Jake secured his daughter's future long before the battle began. Because preparation isn't paranoia. It's responsibility. Character lasts longer than status. Lies collapse. Truth waits patiently. And remember, build your fences well, not because you fear your neighbors, but because you respect your own boundaries enough to defend them. The end.